If someone was dying and you could save them, would you? This may seem like a simple question, but for many people, this is not the case when it comes to opiate users. The National Safety Council reported that you are more likely to die of an accidental overdose than in a fatal car accident. I work with a population who is highly likely to overdose. Many of the clients I work with and their families had no idea about Narcan, what it is, how to use it, and the dangers of using opiates alone. I've worked with several clients who have overdosed and have had several personal friends overdose. I've witnessed people who have been revived with Narcan, sometimes more than once, reintegrate themselves into the community and become useful members of society. On the same token, I have lost several friends to opioid overdoses, and had someone been there with Narcan, maybe they would have been able to recover too. Everyone in the community should be educated about Narcan because anyone can use Narcan, and being revived with Narcan can enable a person to take the steps that they need to recover, and furthermore, it is our duties as human beings to save a life when we have the ability to do so. The presenting issue is that the opioid epidemic is ravaging America. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported that more than 70,200 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2017. This number is startling, and it's not going down anytime soon, but the reality is this number is preventable. The opioid epidemic affects everyone. No one is immune. This is not an issue that's happening in a small corner of the world or just in a part of the United States. No one is immune to drug addiction. This can affect your neighbors, coworkers, friends, even your children. If more people were educated, the death toll could be lowered. It is important to educate not only drug users and their families on Narcan, but everybody. However, this doesn't mean that users are educated. Many people that use heroin every day don't know the risks of using alone, because when someone overdoses alone, they can't call for help. And many people who use drugs, even recreationally and not addictively, don't know that if they're not using heroin, they can still overdose. Street drugs are unregulated, and there are many instances of substances other than heroin being laced with fentanyl. The National Institute on Drug Abuse defined fentanyl as a powerful synthetic opioid that is similar to morphine, but is 50 to 100 times more potent. Fentanyl can kill a person even in an amount as small as just a few grains of salt. It is typically undetectable by the user, and when somebody goes and maybe buys their regular dose of heroin or cocaine, there's no way to know if that's the dose that's going to kill them. In addition, families are also not educated. Many families of addicts or alcoholics feel fear of removing their loved one from the home or kicking them out of the house, and the most common thing that I personally hear is, well, I'm afraid they're going to die in the street. But what these people also don't know is that this will not prevent an overdose. The nonprofit organization Learn to Cope reported that one of the most common places family members will find a loved one who has overdosed is in their room, alone. Their loved one isn't any safer from harm in their home than they are out in the street. However, this is not to say that it's not common to find someone who overdosed out in the community. You might find someone overdosed in a shelter, in the street, or in their car. And anyone in the community can revive someone who overdosed with Narcan, but most people don't carry it because they just don't know how they can help. So the problem largely affects society because addiction is mostly untreated. Many people can't afford treatment because of either financial reasons, insurance, or accessibility in their community. When someone is revived with Narcan, that gives them another opportunity to seek out these treatment opportunities. In addition, there's a national stigma about opiates and Narcan. The reality is drug addicts are getting segregated from others for medical attention because of the element of choice in the disease of addiction. And getting revived with Narcan is not the same as receiving medical treatment. It's just another chance at doing that. In order to lower the death toll, several steps need to be taken. So to recap, drug users, families of users, and the community needs to be educated because Narcan can be used by anyone. So naloxone, which is commonly referred to as the brand name Narcan, which we've discussed, it's an opioid antagonist which reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. It works for between 30 and 90 minutes. So what that means is that you might need to administer another dose of Narcan because they can slip back into the overdose. Narcan causes immediate withdrawal when administered to a person experiencing an overdose. So what that means is there's no way to know how a person is going to react. They could become aggressive, they could become sick, and it's completely unpredictable. So it's important to be prepared for any option. But Narcan is actually non-addictive, and it has no effect on an opioid if an opioid is not present. So what that means is if you find somebody you suspect is overdosed but you don't know, it is still safe to administer Narcan. It cannot hurt somebody if they are not experiencing an opioid overdose. In addition, you have to store Narcan at room temperature and away from direct sunlight, so that means you shouldn't leave Narcan in your car. You should carry it on your person. And it has a shelf life, so you need to refer to the container for an expiration date. So what do you do if you find somebody you suspected has overdosed? Well, the first thing you need to do is call 911 immediately. In the meantime, shout loudly at the person, so that can mean their name, or if you don't know their name, you could say, "Hey, hello, can you hear me?" If they don't respond to verbal stimuli, the next thing to do is to perform what's called a sternum rub. A sternum rub is performed by creating a fist with your hand, like so, and rubbing your knuckles up and down the chest area. A sternum rub is incredibly painful, so if somebody does not respond to that kind of stimuli, it is likely that they have overdosed. If there's no response from that, check their breathing status. However, whether a person is breathing or not, if they're unresponsive to the sternum rub and the verbal stimuli, it's time to administer Narcan and begin CPR. Now, if you don't have Narcan on you, you should check the person's belongings for Narcan. Some people who use opiates do carry Narcan with them, so you can check their person, their pockets, backpack, car, wherever they are, because it's important to check all the options. So the first and most common type of Narcan is intranasal. So what that looks like is very simple. You peel back the package, remove it, you place the tip of the nozzle, just like any other nose spray, in the person's nose, and you put it up until your fingers are touching the person's nose. Then all you have to do next is press the plunger firmly in and get the entire dose inside. So it's very simple. The next common type is the injectable Narcan. So as you see here, it comes with a vial of medication and it comes with the needle. So all you have to do is remove the cap from the naloxone vial and uncover the needle. Then you insert the needle through the rubber plug with the vial upside down and pull back on the plunger and take up to 1 milliliter. Next, you inject the milliliter of naloxone into the upper arm or the thigh muscle. And if no reaction is given in 3 minutes, you need to give the second dose. And this is the same with the nasal spray. It's important, that's why most Narcan kits do come with 2 doses. The last kind, and the most rare kind, is the auto-injector, and it looks something like this. It's very expensive and it's rarely used. Most likely you won't come across somebody who has this on them, but if you do, it has audible instructions on how to use, and it automatically will give the dose. It's very simple. So all of these simple instructions on how to use Narcan can be taught to anybody, but in addition to teaching people how to use Narcan, we can also empower the community to get and use Narcan by teaching them about the Good Samaritan Law. These are laws in place to protect both the person who contacts 911 as well as the person who is overdosed. Callers cannot be prosecuted for having small quantities of medications or drugs in their possession when seeking help for an overdose. So what that means is, say you and your buddy are both using heroin and they're afraid to call because they see their friend is overdosed. However, they can't be prosecuted for having a small amount of heroin or drugs or any other kind with them if they call. So that does protect them. In some states, the law also requires the caller to stay with the patient until emergency medical response has arrived. I would recommend you stay either way, whether the law requires it or not, just because there's possibility that the person does need CPR or a second dose of Narcan. In terms of accessibility, Narcan is currently available in most pharmacies by request and is often covered by some insurance plans. There are also nonprofit organizations that offer trainings and give out Narcan for free. However, we need more readily available access and trainings because there's many people who don't work in the addiction world that have no idea that this stuff exists. So how does this plan solve the problem? Well, education reduces stigma. When we teach people what Narcan is and we show them that this isn't necessarily a cure-all, but it saves someone's lives and gives them the next opportunity to do what they need to do to recover, that helps people to understand how they can help by getting a Narcan kit themselves. themselves. And in addition, people who get revived, they do have the possibility of recovery. Now, some people might say that, well, Narcan medication shouldn't be free because other medication and treatment shouldn't be free. But that would be like saying if someone's having a heart attack, they just shouldn't be revived. Getting dosed with Narcan is not the same thing as receiving treatment for addiction. Just like getting cancer treatment or getting treated for heart disease isn't the same as getting revived once you've died. All Narcan does is revive you from an overdose. That's it. People still have to pay for treatment for detox, rehabs, or anything else relating to their addiction. In addition, some people say that Narcan encourages opioid abuse, and it is hard to refute that fact because there are instances of opioid users having Narcan with them and intentionally taking more than their regular dose because they know that their buddy has Narcan. However, this does not mean that these people deserve to die. They are suffering from a disease. The last thing that people might say who think, well, Narcan's a bad idea, say, well, don't people who get revived with Narcan get a free pass from outstanding crimes? But that's actually not the case. If we refer back to the Good Samaritan law, people don't get away from any other outstanding warrants or crimes when they are revived with Narcan. They don't get excused. So if we treated addiction like any other disease, there would not be a question of the right thing to do. These people are human beings that are struggling with addiction, and it is our duty to save the life that we can, because we can. And it involves so little effort to educate yourself and get a Narcan kit. In reviewing what we have just discussed, my hope is that some perspective was gained about how this issue could affect each and every one of you on a personal level. For people to fully understand the reasoning behind getting a Narcan kit, they have to be properly educated so that people can get revived with Narcan and have the possibility of successfully gaining treatment and reintegrating into society. And we all have the potential to save someone's lives. In summation, you yourself could save someone's life just by taking some time out of your day to purchase a life-saving drug. Thank you all so much for listening.